Hello, fellow witches and wizards. My name is PhoenixGinny, and welcome to the stream. Welcome to Storytime Saturday number 26. And, oh, whoops. I forgot to mute that. We are reading Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And we are reading chapters 15 and 16. The Quidditch File is chapter 15, and chapter 16 is Professor Trelawney's prediction. We are almost done. So, thank you so much for joining me. Please feel free to talk in the chat, join the discussion, because I will be discussing things as I read. If you haven't been here before, that is what I do. Also, if this video is no longer live for you, feel free to join the discussion in the comments. I read those as well. Please like the stream. It really helps, tells YouTube that you like the stream, and YouTube is more likely to share it with other people the more likes that it gets. And if you're not a subscriber, click subscribe. Become a subscriber today. I really want to get to 50 subscribers. I'm really excited. Click the bell notification icon next to that so that you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. I will probably be going live again next week, Friday and Saturday. I usually live stream Fridays and Saturdays, but that's subject to change, so please check my streaming schedule that I post every week on Twitter, link in the description. If I do stream, if everything goes as planned, I'll be streaming next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on YouTube, and I'll be playing Halo, the Master Chief Collection. I forget what mission I'm on, but we're plowing through it. We're about halfway through now. And I will be doing another Storytime Saturday, and I'll be reading chapters 17 and 18 of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and it will be another charity live stream. And the charity I will be sponsoring is the Innocence Project. It is a charity that examines the cases of prisoners in jail, particularly those dealing with DNA evidence. And if they find prisoners to have been unfairly represented, or if they didn't have the DNA evidence that they do now, they are found to be innocent, they help them to get the legal counsel and the procedures in place so that they can be set free. And I'm doing it in honor of Sirius Black, as we will soon find out. He was wrongfully put into prison, and I just think it's very fitting. If you haven't heard yet, I am currently working on launching my own Patreon. I do have a Patreon already, and I have mentioned it before in older videos. It's still there if you want to support me there, but I don't advertise it because I really want to put content on it. And I am currently working on some projects to put on it. The plan is to post monthly content, and I will post, I'm a writer, so I will be writing things. I'll be writing essays and personal narratives and short stories. Most excited about the short story part, and maybe some poems, maybe, I don't know. I'm not really a poet. That's one of all the things I like to write, poetry is at the bottom of the list. But I'm working on some content to post there. I'm planning on launching it June 6th, and it's going very well. I'm going to be posting a personal narrative for free on there. It's just a little story that I wrote last year that I haven't posted anywhere yet. Just about me as a teenager and a little incident that happened to me as a teenager that you might be really interested in. It will be on my Patreon for free so that people can get a sense of what my writing style is, see if they want to become a patron. And I will be posting for my subscribers, for my Patreon subscribers, I'll be posting a Harry Potter film analysis essay that I wrote originally in college, but I'm greatly expanding. It was only 16 pages in college. It's going to be about 50 pages now because I'm talking about literally everything I want to talk about. I am making an argument in my paper that the films accurately portray the books, even when they do things differently, even when they add different scenes or they have different ideas, they go in different directions. I still argue that they capture the spirit of the books, and I argue it for every film. I have something that I talk about. I talk about controversial things as well. Why Dumbledore gets upset in Goblet of Fire in the film, and doesn't quite respond that way in the book, and why I still think it's appropriate that they did it that way in the film. I talk about why they burned down the Weasley home in Half-Blood Prince, and why I feel like that's appropriate, and the decisions that they made in Order of the Phoenix and Deathly Hallows, and all the later ones are really like beefy. But I talk about all kinds of things from the first film to the last, and I've been working really hard on that. I finished my portion on Deathly Hallows Part 1 yesterday, I believe, and so next week I'm going to be focusing on Deathly Hallows Part 2, and then the week after that, the week right before the release, I'm going to tidy it all up, do some editing and some revising, make sure that my sources are cited appropriately, and then I will post it. And I will post a video explaining everything about Patreon and where you can take a look at this. And I will be reading a portion of my analysis essay for my Storytime Saturday. The second Saturday in June, I believe I'm going to be doing that. And I'll probably, if we're still on Prisoner of Azkaban, which I think we will be, I'll be reading the Prisoner of Azkaban one. So you'll get to see a piece of that and decide if you want to become a patron of my Patreon. I'm quite excited about that, and I'll explain that all when I release it. But I believe we should get into the material now. First of all, a recap. We read chapters 13 and 14 last time. 13 was Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw. And Scabbers is gone now. They believe that Crookshanks ate him. And so Ron and Hermione are fighting. And they're also preparing to have a match against Ravenclaw. Gryffindor's really trying to go for the, I was about to say the Triwizard Cup. That's not the next one. The Quidditch Cup. And they have a successful match. And then Ron has an encounter with Sirius Black. Isn't that right? Yes. And Neville, unfortunately, indirectly let Sirius Black into the common room because he left his list of passwords lying around. And then Snape's Grudge is the chapter after that. That's when Harry has a nice invisible jaunt to Hogsmeade and has a bit of fun with Draco Malfoy, slinging mud at him and messing around with him while he's invisible. And then his cloak slips and Malfoy sees his floating head. And so then Harry has to run back to the castle and convince Snape that he was there the whole time. And he ends up running into Snape, and Snape gets upset with him, and Harry tries to lie his way through that situation. Snape encounters the Marauders' map, and the Marauders say not very nice things about him. And then Lupin comes by, and he knows all about the map. And he's upset with Harry that Harry hasn't handed it in. And so he confiscates the map. So Harry no longer has the Marauders' map. Okay, so now we're on chapter 15, the Quidditch Final. I'm going to be drinking this. It is a meal replacement shake. I haven't eaten supper, and I am starving. So, all right, chapter 15, the Quidditch Final. Oh, yes. And we just got a letter from Hagrid saying that Buckbeak lost the court case, so Buckbeak is going to be executed. And now we're about to read that letter that he just sent Hermione. He sent me this. Hermione said, holding out the letter. Harry took it. The parchment was damp, and enormous teardrops had smudged the ink so badly in places that it was very difficult to read. Dear Hermione, we lost. I'm allowed to bring him back to Hogwarts. Execution date to be fixed. Beaky has enjoyed London. I won't forget all the help you gave us. Hagrid. Oh, it's so sad and completely unfair. They can't do this, said Harry. They can't. Buckbeak isn't dangerous. Malfoy's dad's frightened the committee into it, said Hermione, wiping her eyes. You know what he's like. They're a bunch of doddery old fools, and they were scared. There'll be an appeal, though. There always is. Only I can't see any hope. Nothing will have changed. Yeah, it will, said Ron fiercely. You won't have to do all this work alone this time, Hermione. I'll help. Oh, Ron! Hermione flung her arms around Ron's neck and broke down completely. Hermione's had a very rough year. Ron looked quite terrified, patted her very awkwardly on the top of the head. Finally, Hermione drew away. Ron, I'm really, really sorry about Scabbers, she sobbed. Oh, well, he was old, said Ron, looking thoroughly relieved that she had let go of him. And he was a bit useless. You never know. Mom and Dad might get me an owl now. Ron does actually get an owl now. Pigwidgeon, right? In Goblet of Fire, he gets Pigwidgeon. The safety measures imposed on the students since Black's second break-in made it impossible for Harry, Ron, and Hermione to go and visit Hagrid in the evenings. Their only chance of talking to him was during Care of Magical Creatures lessons. He seemed numb with shock at the verdict. It's all my fault. Got all tongue-tied. They were all sitting there in their black robes, and I kept dropping me notes, forgetting all them dates you looked up for me, Hermione. And then Lucius Malfoy stood up and said his bit, and the committee just did exactly what he told them. If you're unfamiliar with my live streams, if you're new, hello, I'm glad you're here. I often will refer to the Harry Potter Pyramid. And it is something that I learned in college. I gotta find it. Where is it? I have it in my pictures somewhere. Where did I put it? Documents? It'll be in documents, won't it? There it is. Where should I put it, OBS? Here? I guess. It's not too bad. No, stop it. Stop doing that. Okay. So, I refer to the Harry Potter Pyramid quite a lot. And what you can see here is that we will find connections, similarities between the same colored titles. So we have Philosopher's Stone / Sorcerer's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and Deathly Hallows. And you see Sorcerer's Stone and Goblet of Fire and Deathly Hallows are all connected, Chamber of Secrets and Half-Blood Prince are connected, and Prisoner of Azkaban and Order of the Phoenix are connected. We will see connections with Order of the Phoenix quite frequently in the book, and I will mention them often. So what I see here is not only Buckbeak. Buckbeak is mentioned briefly in Goblet of Fire, but we see him in Prisoner of Azkaban, where we meet him for the first time. We also see him in Order of the Phoenix at Sirius Black's house, because they're both fugitives. But he's called Witherwings there. So that's not the only connection I see here, and I mentioned this before. But there's also court cases in particular, although now that I think about it, there's a court case in Goblet of Fire, so maybe this doesn't count. Because in Goblet of Fire, we see the court case of Igor Karkaroff in the Pensieve. But we have the court case with Buckbeak and Hagrid, and then in Order of the Phoenix, we have Harry's I was thinking misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, but that's where Mr. Weasley works. The restriction of underage sorcery, yes? The hearing that Harry has for casting the Patronus charm in the presence of Dudley. And that's a connection I made. Although, like I said, it might not actually count because we do have a similar connection in Goblet of Fire. But that was something that I thought of. There's still the appeal, said Ron fiercely. Don't give up yet. We're working on it. They were walking back up to the castle with the rest of the class. Ahead they could see Malfoy, who was walking. Oh, yes. This part's good. Ahead they could see Malfoy, who was walking with Crabbe and Goyle, and kept looking back, laughing derisively. It's no good, Ron, said Hagrid sadly as they reached the castle steps. That committee's in Lucius Malfoy's pocket. I'm just gonna make sure the rest of Beaky's time is the happiest he's ever had. I owe him that. Hagrid turned around and hurried back toward his cabin, his face buried in his handkerchief. Look at him, blubber. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle had been standing just inside the castle doors, listening. Have you ever seen anything quite as pathetic? Said Malfoy. And he's supposed to be our teacher. Harry and Ron both made furious moves toward Malfoy, but Hermione got there first. Smack! She had slapped Malfoy across the face with all the strength she could muster. Malfoy staggered. Harry, Ron, Crabbe, and Goyle stood flabbergasted as Hermione raised her hand again. She's had it. She's taken no more shit. She's had a rough year, okay? She's had it up to here. And so, like, she finally lashes out. That might be another connection. I might be reaching a little bit here. Yeah, so in the movie, and I didn't talk about this in my essay, maybe I should. It doesn't really go. See, there's so many things I could talk about each film and each book. So many things. It's already like 50 pages long. It might end up being a little bit more. I'm not done with Deathly Hallows Part 2. But I had to pick a theme and kind of go and stick to the theme. For instance, Sorcerer's Stone is all about discovering magic. And so I only talk about examples about discovering magic in the book and the film. But there's so many other things I could talk about. And that same goes with all the film portions. And for Prisoner of Azkaban, I talk about how they're becoming teenagers and how the primary focus of that film was showing how much more like teenagers the characters are. I guess, I could argue that Hermione being physically violent towards Draco Malfoy does show that she's growing up, that she is more of a teenager, that she's hormonal. You know what? I might end up talking about that. I should go back and add that. Because that's my favorite part of the film. The film does it better, in my opinion. One of those things I'll talk about is how sometimes the movies do better than the books. A lot of fans get mad. Just like the books, if you're a true fan, then the books are better. And it's just like, no, sometimes the movie really is better. And there's plenty of examples of when the movie is better. I feel like I'm not centered in the camera. My webcam doesn't have a great stand to put. It's kind of just resting on my monitor, so I can't ever really place it and keep it there. But, in the book, it's just a smack. And that's nice and all, but in the movie, it's a proper punch. It's great. It's so good. So much better in the movie, in my opinion. I should probably talk about that. I do mention some scenes in the films that I feel like the films do better than the book does. Don't you dare call Hagrid pathetic. You foul, you evil. Hermione, said Ron weakly, and he tried to grab her hand as she swung it back. I forgot to mention. So I made kind of a connection here. There's another time where physical violence is inflicted upon Draco, and that's Order of the Phoenix. Remember, you will make connections between this book and Order of the Phoenix because they are together. They're directly not parallel. I don't think perpendicular is the right word either. But I mean, they're directly across from each other there. So we're going to see connections between Prisoner of Azkaban and Order of the Phoenix. Order of the Phoenix, Harry beats the shit out of Malfoy, and it's great. That's probably my favorite instance out of the entire book series ever. Maybe. I feel like I say that about a lot of things. But it's great. And so here we have Hermione smacking him across the face. It might be a connection. It is a different character inflicting the violence. And I thought, well, is there any other time where violence is inflicted upon Malfoy? Yes, there is. In Half-Blood Prince with the Sectum Semper spell. But that's a spell. It's not physical, it's magical. Again, Goblet of Fire, it gets turned into a ferret. Again, magical, not physical. So I feel like that might be a connection. It might be. Get off, Ron! Hermione pulled out her wand, just like she does in the movie. Although the movie comes before the punch in the movie. The wand comes out before the punch. Malfoy stepped backward. Crabbe and Goyle looked at him for instructions. Thoroughly bewildered. Come on, Malfoy muttered, and in a moment all three of them had disappeared into the passageway to the dungeons. Hermione, Ron said again. He's probably in love. Sounding both stunned and impressed. Harry, you'd better beat him in the Quidditch final, Hermione said shrilly. You just better had, because I can't stand it if Slytherin wins. We're doing charms, said Ron, still goggling at Hermione. We'd better go. They hurried up the marble staircase toward Professor Flitwick's classroom. You're late, boys, said Professor Flitwick reprovingly as Harry opened the classroom door. Come along, quickly, one's out. We're experimenting with cheering charms today. We've already divided into pairs. Harry and Ron hurried to a desk and at the back and opened their bags. Ron looked behind him. Where's Hermione gone? She was just there, wasn't she? Harry looked around, too. Hermione hadn't entered the classroom, yet Harry knew she had been right next to him when he had opened the door. She's going to come in a few seconds. That's weird, said Harry, staring at Ron. Maybe she went to the bathroom or something. But Hermione didn't turn up all lesson. Oh, that's right. She fell asleep. She hasn't been sleeping. She fell asleep. Yeah, they're going to find her asleep in the common room. They're just going to be like, what? How? They're going to be so confused. She could have done with a cheering charm on her, too, said Ron as the class left for lunch, all grinning broadly. The cheering charms had left them with a feeling of great contentment. Makes me wonder why they don't do cheering charms more often. This is the only time we hear of it, as far as I know. Hermione wasn't at lunch either. By the time they had finished their apple pie... Oh, man. I'm too hungry for this. The after effects of the cheering charms were wearing off, and Harry and Ron had started to get slightly worried. You don't think Malfoy did something to her? Ron said anxiously as they hurried upstairs toward Gryffindor Tower. I wouldn't put it past him. They passed the security trolls, gave the fat lady the password, flippity-gibbet, and scrambled through the portrait hole into the common room. Hermione was sitting at a table, fast asleep, her head resting on an open arithmancy book. They went to sit down on either side of her. Harry prodded her awake. What? Said Hermione, waking with a start and staring wildly around. Is it time to go? Which lesson have we got now? Divination, but it's not for another 20 minutes, said Harry. Hermione, why didn't you come to Charms? What? Oh no, Hermione squeaked. I forgot to go to Charms. But how could you forget? Said Harry. You were with us till we were right outside the classroom. I don't believe it, Hermione wailed. Was Professor Flitwick angry? Oh, it was Malfoy. I was thinking about him and I lost track of things. You know what, Hermione? Said Ron, looking down at the enormous arithmancy book Hermione had been using as a pillow. I reckon you're cracking up. You're trying to do too much. No, I'm not, said Hermione, brushing her hair out of her eyes and staring hopelessly around for her bag. I just made a mistake, that's all. I'd better go and see Professor Flitwick and say sorry. I'll see you in divination. Hermione joined them at the foot of the ladder to Professor Trelawney's classroom 20 minutes later, looking extremely harassed. I can't believe I missed hearing Charms, and I bet they come up in our exams. Professor Flitwick hinted they might. Together they climbed the ladder into the dim, stifling tower room. Glowing on every little table was a crystal ball full of pearly white mist. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat down together at the same rickety table. I thought we weren't starting crystal balls until next term, Ron muttered, casting a wary eye around for Professor Trelawney in case she was lurking nearby. Don't complain, this means we finished palmistry, Harry muttered back. I was getting sick of her flinching every time she looked at my hands. Good day to you, said the familiar misty voice, and Professor Trelawney made her usual dramatic entrance out of the shadows. Parvati and Lavender quivered with excitement, their faces lit by the milky glow of their crystal ball. I have decided to introduce the crystal ball a little earlier than I had planned, said Professor Trelawney, sitting with her back to the fire and gazing around. The fates have informed me that your examination in June will concern the orb, and I am anxious to give you sufficient practice. Hermione snorted. Well, honestly, the fates have informed her. Who sets the exam? She does. What an amazing prediction, she said, not troubling to keep her voice low. Harry and Ron choked back laughs. It was hard to tell whether Professor Trelawney had heard them, as her face was hidden in shadow. She continued, however, as though she had not. Crystal gazing is a particularly refined art, she said dreamily. I do not expect any of you to see when first you peer into the orb's infinite depths. We shall start by practicing relaxing the conscious mind and external eyes. Ron began to snigger uncontrollably and had to stuff his fist in his mouth to stifle the noise, so as to clear the inner eye and the superconscious. Perhaps, if we are lucky, some of you will see before the end of the class. And so they began. Harry, at least, felt extremely foolish, staring blankly at the crystal ball, trying to keep his mind empty when thoughts such as, "This is stupid," kept drifting across it. Is this another connection? I don't know. Because Harry has to empty his mind when he does occlumency lessons in Order of the Phoenix. It might be. I should probably be keeping track of this. Always have a pencil handy when you're reading. Let's see. OOTP. It didn't help that Ron kept breaking into silent giggles and Hermione kept tutting. Seen anything yet? Harry asked them after a quarter of an hour's quiet crystal gazing. Yeah, there's a burn on this table, said Ron, pointing. Someone spilt their candle. This is such a waste of time, Hermione hissed. I could be practicing something useful. I could be catching up on cheering charms. Professor Trelawney rustled past. Would anyone like me to help them interpret the shadowy portents written in their ore? She murmured over the clinking of her bangles. I'm gonna get more comfortable for a second. My nose is itchy. I don't think my skin likes my foundation very much. Oh, okay. And you know, I don't think I changed the color on my keyboard today. I like to do that every day. My keyboard is a white, I think, white, and then my tower is a magenta, pink, purple color. It's quite fun. I was gonna look up a word. That's what we like to do here. We like to look up words, meaning of words. Hello, Google. The word is portents. Definition. Portents and prophecies, huh? A sign or warning that something, especially something momentous or calamitous, is likely to happen. Okay. It's an omen, kind of. Looks like. Shadowy portents. We're going to circle this. I'm going to put the definition in the margin. All right. Thank you, Google. I don't need help, Ron whispered. It's obvious what this means. There's going to be loads of fog tonight. Both Harry and Hermione burst out laughing. Now, really, said Professor Trelawney as everyone's heads turned in their direction. Parvati and Lavender were looking scandalized. You are disturbing the clairvoyant vibrations. She approached their table and peered into their crystal ball. Harry felt his heart sinking. He was sure he knew what was coming. There is something here, Professor Trelawney whispered, lowering her face to the ball so that it was reflecting twice in her huge glasses. Something moving. But what is it? Harry was prepared to bet everything he owned, including his firebolt, that it wasn't good news, whatever it was. And sure enough, my dear, Professor Trelawney breathed, gazing up at Harry, it is here, plainer than ever before. My dear, stalking toward you, growing ever closer. Oh, for goodness sake, said Hermione loudly. Not that ridiculous grim again. Professor Trelawney raised her enormous eyes to Hermione's face. Parvati whispered something to Lavender, and they both glared at Hermione, too. Professor Trelawney stood up, surveying Hermione with unmistakable anger. I am sorry to say that from the moment you have arrived in this class, my dear, it has been apparent that you do not have what the noble art of divination requires. Indeed, I don't remember ever meeting a student whose mind was so hopelessly mundane. There was a moment's silence. Then, "Fine," said Hermione suddenly, getting up and cramming Unfogging the Future back into her bag. "Fine," she repeated, swinging the bag over her shoulder and almost knocking Ron off his chair. "I give up. I'm leaving." And to the whole class's amazement, Hermione strode over to the trap door, kicked it open, and climbed down the ladder out of sight. Which is something that Professor Trelawney predicted earlier in the year, that someone would leave them. Someone in the classroom would leave them. And she has. It took a few minutes for the class to settle down again. Professor Trelawney seemed to have forgotten all about the Grim. She turned abruptly from Harry and Ron's table, breathing rather heavily as she tugged her gauzy shawl more closely to her. I was going to say something else, too. I forget what it was. Hermione's having a really interesting day, isn't she? "Ooh," said Lavender suddenly, making everyone start. "Ooh, Professor Trelawney, I've just remembered. You saw her leaving, didn't you? Didn't you, Professor? Around Easter, one of our number will leave us forever. You said it ages ago, Professor." Which is what I just said. Professor Trelawney gave her a dewy smile. "Yes, my dear, I did indeed know that Miss Granger would be leaving us. One hopes, however, that one might have mistaken the signs. The inner eye can be a burden, you know." Lavender and Parvati looked deeply impressed and moved over so that Professor Trelawney could join their table instead. "Some day Hermione's having, eh?" Ron muttered to Harry, looking odd. "Yeah." Harry glanced into the crystal ball, but saw nothing but swirling white mist. Had Professor Trelawney really seen the Grim again? Would he? The last thing he needed was another near-fatal accident, with the Quidditch final drawing ever nearer. The Easter holidays were not exactly relaxing. The third years had never had so much homework. And that's something they're going to say literally every year. "We have way more homework than last year. It's as if the course is getting more difficult as the years go on." They're always surprised. I'll mark that. Like every year. We'll keep track. Neville Longbottom seemed close to a nervous collapse, and he wasn't the only one. "Call this a holiday," Seamus Finnegan roared at the common room one afternoon. "The exams are ages away. Where are they playing at?" But nobody had as much to do as Hermione. Even without divination, she was taking more subjects than anybody else. She was usually last to leave the common room at night, first to arrive at the library the next morning. She had shadows like lupins under her eyes and seemed constantly close to tears. Ron had taken over responsibility for Buckbeak's appeal. When he wasn't doing his own work, he was poring over enormously thick volumes, with names like The Handbook of Hippogriff Psychology and Fowl or Fowl. Fowl spelled differently. The first vowel Fowl, as in bird, and then fowl Foul, as in awful. A study of hippogriff brutality. He was so absorbed, he even forgot to be horrible to Crookshanks. Harry, meanwhile, had to fit in his homework around Quidditch practice every day, not to mention endless discussions of tactics with Wood. The Gryffindor-Slytherin match would take place on the first Saturday after the Easter holidays. Slytherin was leading the tournament by exactly 200 points. This meant, as Wood constantly reminded his team, that they needed to win the match by more than that amount to win the cup. It almost meant that the burden of winning fell largely on Harry, because capturing the snitch was worth 150 points. "So you must catch it, only if we're more than 50 points up," Wood told Harry constantly. "Only if we're more than 50 points up, Harry, or we win the match, but lose the cup. You've got that, haven't you? You must catch the snitch only if we're—" "I know, Oliver," Harry yelled. The whole of Gryffindor House was obsessed with the coming match. Gryffindor hadn't won the Quidditch Cup since the legendary Charlie Weasley, Ron's second oldest brother, had been Seeker. But Harry doubted whether any of them, even Wood, wanted to win as much as he did. The enormity between Harry and Malfoy. The enmity between Harry and Malfoy was at its highest point ever. Malfoy was still smarting about the mud-throwing incident in Hogsmeade, and was even more furious that Harry had somehow wormed his way out of punishment. Harry hadn't forgotten Malfoy's attempt to sabotage him in the match against Ravenclaw, but it was the matter of Buckbeak that made him most determined to beat Malfoy in front of the entire school. Never in anyone's memory had a match approached in such a highly charged atmosphere. By the time the holidays were over, tension between the two teams and their houses was at the breaking point. A number of small scuffles broke out in the corridors, culminating in a nasty incident in which a Gryffindor 4th year and a Slytherin 6th year ended up in the hospital wing with leaks sprouting out of their ears. Harry was having a particularly bad time of it. He couldn't walk to class without Slytherins sticking out their legs and trying to trip him up. Crabbe and Goyle kept popping up wherever he went, and slouching away, looking disappointed when they saw him surrounded by people. Wood had given instructions that Harry should be accompanied everywhere he went, in case the Slytherins tried to put him out of action. The whole of Gryffindor House took up the challenge enthusiastically, so that it was impossible for Harry to get to classes on time because he was surrounded by a vast, chattering crowd. Harry was more concerned for his firebolt's safety than his own. When he wasn't flying it, he locked it securely in his trunk and frequently dashed back up to Gryffindor Tower at break times to check that it was still there. All usual pursuits were abandoned in the Gryffindor common room the night before the match. Even Hermione had put down her books. "I can't walk. I can't concentrate," she said nervously. There was a great deal of noise. Fred and George Weasley were dealing with the pressure by being louder and more exuberant than ever. Oliver Wood was crouched over a model of a Quidditch field in the corner, prodding little figures across it with his wand and muttering to himself. Angelina, Alicia, and Katie were laughing at Fred's and George's jokes. Harry was sitting with Ron and Hermione, removed from the center of things, trying not to think about the next day, because every time he did, he had the horrible sensation that something very large was fighting to get out of his stomach. "You're going to be fine," Hermione told him, though she looked positively terrified. "You've got a firebolt," said Ron. "Yeah," said Harry, his stomach writhing. It came as a relief when Wood suddenly stood up and yelled, "Team, bed." Harry slept badly. First he dreamed that he had overslept and that Wood was yelling, "Where were you? We had to use Neville instead." Then he dreamt that Malfoy and the rest of the Slytherin team arrived for the match riding dragons. He was flying at breakneck speed, trying to avoid a spurt of flames from Malfoy's steed's mouth. When he realized he had forgotten his firebolt, he fell through the air and woke with a start. It was a few seconds before Harry remembered that the match hadn't taken place yet, that he was safe in bed, and that the Slytherin team definitely wouldn't be allowed to play on dragons. He was feeling very thirsty. Quietly as he could, he got out of his four-poster and went to pour himself some water from the silver jug beneath the window. The grounds were still and quiet. No breath of wind disturbed the treetops in the forbidden forest. The whomping willow was motionless and innocent-looking. It looked as though the conditions for the match would be perfect. Harry set down his goblet and was about to turn back to his bed when something caught his eye. An animal of some kind was prowling across the silvery lawn. I always forget this part. Harry dashed to his bedside table, snatched up his glasses, and put them on, then hurried back to the window. It couldn't be the Grim. Not now. Not right before the match. He peered out at the grounds again, and, after a minute's frantic searching, spotted it. It was skirting the edge of the forest now. It wasn't the Grim at all. It was a cat. Harry clutched the window ledge in relief as he recognized the bottle-brush tail. It was only Crookshanks. Or was it only Crookshanks? Harry squinted, pressing his nose flat against the glass. Crookshanks seemed to have come to a halt. Harry was sure he could see something else moving in the shadow of the trees, too. And just then it emerged. A gigantic, shaggy black dog moving stealthily across the lawn. Crookshanks trotting at its side. Harry stared. What did this mean? If Crookshanks could see the dog as well, how could it be an omen of Harry's death? Excuse me. Ron, Harry hissed. Ron, wake up. Huh? I need you to tell me if you can see something. It's so dark, Harry, Ron muttered thickly. What are you on about? Down here. Harry looked quickly back out of the window. Crookshanks and the dog had vanished. Harry climbed onto the windowsill to look right down into the shadows of the castle, but they weren't there. Where had they gone? A loud snore told him Ron had fallen asleep again. Harry and the rest of the Gryffindor team entered the Great Hall the next day to enormous applause. Harry couldn't help grinning broadly as he saw that both the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff tables were applauding them too. The Slytherin table hissed loudly as they passed. Harry noticed that Malfoy looked even paler than usual. Wood spent the whole of breakfast urging his team to eat, while touching nothing himself. Then he hurried them off to the field before anyone else had finished, so they could get an idea of the conditions. As they left the Great Hall, everyone applauded again. I didn't know she spoke to him. Good luck, Harry, called Cho. Harry felt himself blushing. Sorry. I'm not a Cho Chang fan. He'll figure that out. Okay, no one to speak of. Sun's a bit bright. That could impair your vision. Watch out for it. Ground's fairly hard. Good. That'll give us a fast kickoff. Wood paced the field, staring around, with the team behind him. Finally, they saw the front doors of the castle open in the distance and the rest of the school spilling onto the lawn. Locker rooms, said Wood tersely. None of them spoke as they changed into their scarlet robes. Harry wondered if they were feeling like he was, as though he'd eaten something extremely wriggly for breakfast. In what seemed like no time at all, Wood was saying, Okay, it's time. Let's go. They walked out onto the field to a tidal wave of noise. 3/4 of the crowd were wearing scarlet rosettes, waving scarlet flags with the Gryffindor lion upon them, or brandishing banners with slogans like, Go Gryffindor, and Lions for the Cup. Behind the Slytherin goalposts, however, 200 people were wearing green, the silver serpent of Slytherin glittering on their flags, and Professor Snape sat in the very front row, wearing green like everyone else, and a very grim smile. What is a rosette? Excuse me, I might be getting sick. My throat was not feeling so great last night. What is a rosette? A rose-shaped decoration typically made of ribbon and awarded to winners of a competition. Really? Okay. I feel like I might be wrong about that. Did I spell it correctly? Rose, and then E, and then TTES. No? I'm seeing a lot of baked goods. They looked good, but I don't think that's what they were wearing. don't know. Maybe it's a British term. I don't know. "And here are the Gryffindors," yelled Lee Jordan, who was acting as commentator as usual. "Potter, Bell, Johnson, Spinnet, Weasley, and Wood. Widely acknowledged as the best team Hogwarts has seen in a good few years." Lee's comments were drowned by a tide of boos from the Slytherin end. And here come the Slytherin team, led by Captain Flint. He's made some changes in the lineup and seems to be going for size rather than skill. More boos from the Slytherin crowd. Wait, oh yeah, I was like, why? But because Lee Jordan is saying not nice things. Harry, however, thought Lee had a point. Malfoy was easily the smallest person on the Slytherin team. The rest of them were enormous. This is a longer chapter, isn't it? I feel like I'm usually done by now. We're almost there. "Captains, shake hands," said Madame Hooch. Flint and Wood approached each other and grasped each other's hand very tightly. It looked as though each was trying to break the other's fingers. "Mount your brooms," said Madame Hooch. 3, 2, 1. The sound of her whistle was lost in the roar from the crowd as 14 brooms rose into the air. Harry felt his hair fly back off his forehead. His nerves left him in the thrill of the flight. He glanced around, saw Malfoy on his tail, and sped off in search of the snitch. "And it's Gryffindor in possession. Alicia Spinnet of Gryffindor with the quaffle, heading straight for the Slytherin goalposts. Looking good, Alicia. Ah, no. Quaffle intercepted by Warrington. Warrington of Slytherin tearing up the field. Wham! Nice bludger work there by George Weasley. Warrington drops the quaffle. It's caught by Johnson. Gryffindor back in possession. Come on, Angelina. Nice swerve around Montague. Duck, Angelina, that's a bludger. She scores! 10-0 to Gryffindor." Angelina punched the air as she soared around the end of the field. The sea of scarlet below was screaming its delight. Ouch! Angelina was nearly thrown from her broom as Marcus Flint went smashing into her. "Sorry," said Flint as the crowd below booed. "Sorry, didn't see her." A moment later, Fred Weasley chucked his beater's club at the back of Flint's head. Flint's nose smashed into the handle of his broom and began to bleed. "That will do," shrieked Madame Hooch, zooming between them. "Penalty shot to Gryffindor for an unprovoked attack on their chaser. Penalty shot to Slytherin for deliberate damage to their chaser." "Come off it, miss," howled Fred, but Madame Hooch blew her whistle and Alicia flew forward to take the penalty. "Come on, Alicia," yelled Lee into the silence that had descended on the crowd. "Yes, she's beaten the keeper. 20-0 to Gryffindor." Harry turned the firebolt sharply to watch Flint, still bleeding freely, fly forward to take the Slytherin penalty. Wood was hovering in front of the Gryffindor goalposts, his jaw clenched. "Course, Wood's a superb keeper," Lee Jordan told the crowd as Flint waited for Madame Hooch's whistle. "Superb, very difficult to pass. Very difficult indeed. Yes, I don't believe it. He saved it." Relieved, Harry zoomed away, gazing around for the snitch, but instead making sure he caught every word of Lee's commentary. It was essential that he hold Malfoy off the snitch until Gryffindor was more than 50 points up. "Gryffindor in possession. No, Slytherin in possession. No, Gryffindor back in possession, and it's Katie Bell. Katie Bell for Gryffindor with the quaffle. She's streaking up the field." "That was deliberate." Montague, a Slytherin chaser, had swerved in front of Katie, and instead of seizing the quaffle, had grabbed her head. Katie cartwheeled in the air, managed to stay on her broom, but dropped the quaffle. This is intense. Madame Hooch's whistle rang out again as she soared over to Montague and began shouting at him. A minute later, Katie had put another penalty past the Slytherin keeper. 30-0. Take that, you dirty cheating. Jordan, if you can't commentate in an unbiased way. I'm telling it like it is, Professor. Harry felt a huge jolt of excitement. He had seen the snitch. It was shimmering at the foot of one of the Gryffindor goalposts, but he mustn't catch it yet. And if Malfoy saw it... Faking a look of sudden concentration, Harry pulled his firebolt around and sped off toward the Slytherin end. It worked. Malfoy went harring after him, clearly thinking Harry had seen the snitch there. Harring? Herring? Is it herring? Run with great speed. British. Gerund or present participle. Herring? Harring?
Hair.
Hair. Herring. Okay. Malfoy went herring after him, clearly thinking Harry had seen the snitch there. Whoosh! One of the bludgers came streaking past Harry's right ear, hit by the gigantic Slytherin beater, Derek. Then again, whoosh! The second bludger grazed Harry's elbow. The other beater, Bowl, was closing in. Harry had a fleeting glimpse of Bowl and Derek zooming toward him, clubs raised. He turned the firebolt upward at the last second, and Bowl and Derek collided with a sickening crunch. "Ha ha!" yelled Lee Jordan as the Slytherin beaters lurched away from each other, clutching their heads. "Too bad, boys. You'll need to get up earlier than that to beat a firebolt. And it's Gryffindor in possession again, as Johnson takes the quaffle. Flint alongside her. Poke him in the eye, Angelina." "It was a joke, Professor. It was a joke." "Oh no, Flint in possession. Flint flying toward the Gryffindor goalposts. Come on now, Wood, save." But Flint had scored. There was an eruption of cheers from the Slytherin end, and Lee swore so badly that Professor McGonagall tried to tug the magical megaphone away from him. "Sorry, Professor, sorry. Won't happen again. So, Gryffindor in the lead, 20 points to 10, and Gryffindor in possession." It was turning into the dirtiest game Harry had ever played in. Enraged that Gryffindor had taken such an early lead, the Slytherins were rapidly resorting to any means to take the quaffle. Bowl hit Alicia with his club and tried to say he thought she was a bludger. Yeah, right. George Weasley elbowed Bowl in the face in retaliation. Madam Hooch awarded both teams penalties, and Wood pulled off another spectacular save, making the score 40 to 10 to Gryffindor. The snitch had disappeared again. Malfoy was still keeping close to Harry as he soared over the match, looking around for it. Once Gryffindor was 50 points ahead. Katie scored, 50 to 10. Fred and George Weasley were swooping around her, clubs raised, in case any of the Slytherins were thinking of revenge. Bowl and Derek took advantage of Fred's and George's absence to aim both bludgers at Wood. They caught him in the stomach, one after the other, and he rolled over in the air, clutching his broom, completely winded. Madam Hooch was beside herself. "You do not attack the keeper unless the quaffle is within the scoring area," she shrieked at Bowl and Derek. "Gryffindor penalty." And Angelina scored, 60 to 10. Moments later, Fred Weasley pelted a bludger at Warrington, knocking the quaffle out of his hands. Alicia seized it and put it through the Slytherin goal, 70 to 10. How many points do Gryffindors need again? That was way earlier. Okay, so they have to be more than 50 points up, which they are. So if Harry sees the snitch, he should catch it. Where was I? The Gryffindor crowd below was screaming itself hoarse. Gryffindor was 60 points in the lead, and if Harry caught the snitch now, the cup was theirs. Harry could almost feel hundreds of eyes following him as he soared around the field, high above the rest of the game, with Malfoy speeding along behind him. And then he saw it. The snitch was sparkling 20 feet above him. Harry put on a huge burst of speed. The wind is roaring in his ears. He stretched out his hand, but suddenly the firebolt was slowing down. Horrified, he looked around. Malfoy had thrown himself forward, grabbed hold of the firebolt's tail, and was pulling it back. How is Malfoy able to do this? Isn't the firebolt, wicked fast? Harry was angry enough to hit Malfoy, but couldn't reach. Malfoy was panting with the effort of holding on to the firebolt, but his eyes were sparkling maliciously. He had achieved what he'd wanted to do. The snitch had disappeared again. Penalty! Penalty to Gryffindor! I've never seen such tactics! Madam Hooch screeched, shooting up to where Malfoy was sliding back onto his Nimbus 2001. You cheating scum! Lee Jordan was howling into the megaphone, dancing out of Professor McGonagall's reach. You filthy, cheating... Professor McGonagall didn't even bother to tell him off. She was actually shaking her finger in Malfoy's direction. Her hat had fallen off, and she too was shouting furiously. Alicia took Gryffindor's penalty, but she was so angry she missed by several feet. The Gryffindor team was losing concentration, and the Slytherins, delighted by Malfoy's foul on Harry, were being spurred on to greater heights. Slytherin in possession, Slytherin heading for goal, Montague scores. Lee groaned. 70-20 to Gryffindor. Harry was now marking Malfoy so closely their knees kept hitting each other. Harry wasn't going to let Malfoy anywhere near the snitch. Get out of it, Potter! Malfoy yelled in frustration as he tried to turn and found Harry blocking him. Angelina Johnson gets the quaffle for Gryffindor. Come on, Angelina, come on! Harry looked around. Every single Slytherin player apart from Malfoy was streaking up the pitch toward Angelina, including the Slytherin keeper. They were all going to block her. Harry wheeled the firebolt around, bent so low he was lying flat along the handle, and kicked it forward. Like a bullet, he shot toward the Slytherins. Ah! They scattered as the firebolt zoomed toward them. Angelina's way was clear. She scores! She scores! Gryffindor leads by 80 points to 20. Harry, who had almost pelted headlong into the stands, skidded to a halt in midair, reversed, and zoomed back into the middle of the field. And then he saw something to make his heart stand still. Malfoy was diving, a look of triumph on his face. There, a few feet above the grass below, was a tiny golden glimmer. Harry urged the firebolt downward, but Malfoy was miles ahead. Go, go, go! Harry urged his broom. He was gaining on Malfoy. Harry flattened himself to the broom handle as Bowl sent a bludger at him. He was at Malfoy's ankles. He was level. Harry threw himself forward, took both hands off his broom. He knocked Malfoy's arm out of the way, and... Yes! He pulled out of his dive, his hand in the air, and the stadium exploded. Harry soared above the crowd, an odd ringing in his ears. The tiny golden ball was held tight in his fist, beating its wings hopelessly against his fingers. Then Wood was speeding toward him, half blinded by tears. He seized Harry around the neck and sobbed unrestrainedly into his shoulder. Harry felt two large thumps as Fred and George hit them. Then Angelina's, Alicia's, and Katie's voices. We've won the cup! We've won the cup! Tangled together in a many-armed hug, the Gryffindor team sank, yelling hoarsely back to earth. Wave upon wave of crimson supporters was pouring over the barriers onto the field. Hands were raining down on their backs. Harry had a confused impression of noise and bodies pressing in on him. Then he and the rest of the team were hoisted onto the shoulders of the crowd. Thrust into the light, he saw Hagrid, plastered with crimson rosettes. You beat him, Harry, you beat him. Wait till I tell Buckbeak. There was Percy jumping up and down like a maniac, all dignity forgotten. Professor McGonagall was sobbing harder even than Wood, wiping her eyes with an enormous Gryffindor flag. And there, fighting their way toward Harry, were Ron and Hermione. Words failed them. They simply beamed as Harry was borne toward the stands, where Dumbledore stood waiting with the enormous Quidditch cup. If only there had been a Dementor around. As a sobbing Wood passed Harry the cup, as he lifted it into the air, Harry felt he could have produced the world's best Patronus. And that is the only time that we will win the Quidditch Cup. Because next year there won't be any Quidditch because of the Triwizard Tournament. Harry's going to be banned from Quidditch in Order of the Phoenix by Umbridge. He's going to get detention for the last match in Half-Blood Prince because of what he does to Malfoy. And in Deathly Hallows, he doesn't go to Hogwarts. So, that was the last Quidditch game. Oh, no, that's not true. The only Quidditch Cup. That's what I should say. It is not the last Quidditch game, however, thankfully. Because Quidditch was great. But that is the end of Chapter 15. And so I will be taking a 15-minute break. And then we will come back and read Chapter 16, Professor Trelawney's Prediction. I don't know how long this chapter is. I think it's about average, maybe. Okay, so I would like to remind you to leave a like on the stream. It tells YouTube that you like the stream, and YouTube is more likely to share it with other people so I can get more viewers. If you're not subscribed, click subscribe and click the bell icon so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. I plan to go live next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on YouTube, and I'll be playing Halo 1. And then the next day, I'll be reading more Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and it will be a charity live stream, and I'll be sponsoring the Innocence Project. And please feel free to chat in the comments or in the chat whenever you happen to be watching this video, and follow me on Twitter, link in the description. And now I'll be taking my 15-minute break, and I will be right back. Welcome back. Okay, so now is the time to read the next chapter, Chapter 16, Professor Trelawney's Prediction. Chapter 16, Professor Trelawney's Prediction. Harry's euphoria at finally winning the Quidditch Cup lasted at least a week. Even the weather seemed to be celebrating. As June approached, the days became cloudless and sultry, and all anybody felt like doing was strolling onto the grounds and flopping down on the grass with several pints of iced pumpkin juice. Perhaps playing a casual game of gobstones, or watching the giant squid propel itself dreamily across the surface of the lake. But they couldn't. Exams were nearly upon them, and instead of lazing around outside, the students were forced to remain inside the castle, trying to bully their brains into concentrating while enticing wafts of summer air drifted in through the windows. Even Fred and George Weasley had been spotted working. They were about to take their OWLs, ordinary wizarding levels. Percy was getting ready to take his newts, nastily exhausting wizarding tests. The highest qualification Hogwarts offered. As Percy hoped to enter the Ministry of Magic, he needed top grades. He was becoming increasingly edgy and gave very severe punishments to anybody who disturbed the quiet of the common room in the evenings. In fact, the only person who seemed more anxious than Percy was Hermione. Harry and Ron had given up asking her how she was managing to attend several classes at once, but they couldn't restrain themselves when they saw the exam schedule she had drawn up for herself. The first column read Monday, 6 o'clock, arithmancy. Monday, 9 o'clock, arithmancy, 9 o'clock, transfiguration, lunch, 1 o'clock charms, 1 o'clock ancient runes. Hermione, Ron said cautiously, because she was liable to explode when interrupted these days. Are you sure you've copied down these times, right? What? Snapped Hermione, picking up the exam schedule and examining it. Yes, of course I have. Is there any point asking how you're going to sit for 2 exams at once? Said Harry. No, said Hermione shortly. Have either of you seen my copy of Numerology and Grammatica? "Oh yeah, I borrowed it for a bit of bedtime reading," said Ron, but very quietly. Hermione started shifting heaps of parchment around on her table, looking for the book. Just then there was a rustle at the window, and Hedwig fluttered through it, a note clutched tight in her beak. Forgive me, my throat isn't doing well. My throat is kind of scratchy. I don't know what's going on. "It's from Hagrid," said Harry, ripping the note open. "Buckbeak's appeal. It's set for the 6th. "That's the day we finish our exams," said Hermione, still looking everywhere for her arithmancy book. "And they're coming up here to do it," said Harry, still reading from the letter. "Someone from the Ministry of Magic and an executioner." Hermione looked up, startled. "They're bringing the executioner to the appeal? But that sounds as though they've already decided." "Yeah, it does," said Harry slowly. "They can't," Ron howled. "I've spent ages reading up on stuff for him. They can't just ignore it all." But Harry had a horrible feeling that the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures had its mind made up for it by Mr. Malfoy. Draco, who had been noticeably subdued since Gryffindor's triumph in the Quidditch final, seemed to regain some of his old swagger over the next few days. From sneering comments Harry overheard, Malfoy was certain Buckbeak was going to be killed, and seemed thoroughly pleased with himself for bringing it about. It was all Harry could do to stop himself imitating Hermione and hitting Malfoy in the face on these occasions. And the worst thing of all was that they had no time or opportunity to go and see Hagrid because the strict new security measures had not been lifted, and Harry didn't dare retrieve his invisibility cloak from below the one-eyed witch. Well, I wonder when he goes to get it. I guess it's still there. Exam week began, and an unnatural hush fell over the castle. The third years emerged from Transfiguration at lunchtime on Monday, limp and ashen-faced, comparing results and bemoaning the difficulty of the tasks they had been set, which had included turning a teapot into a tortoise. 'Cause you never know when you're going to need a tortoise. Hermione irritated the rest by fussing about how her tortoise had looked more like a turtle, which was the least of everyone else's worries. Oh my god, Hermione. Really? Mine still had a spout for a tail. What a nightmare. Were the tortoises supposed to breathe steam? It still had a willow patterned shell. Do you think that'll count against me? Then after a hasty lunch, it was straight back upstairs for the charms exam. Hermione had been right. Professor Flitwick did indeed test them on cheering charms. Harry slightly overdid his out of nerves, and Ron, who was partnering him, ended up in fits of hysterical laughter and had to be led away to a quiet room for an hour before he was ready to perform the charm himself. After dinner, the students hurried back to their common rooms, not to relax, but to start studying for care of magical creatures, potions, and astronomy. Hagrid presided over the care of magical creatures exam the following morning with a very preoccupied air indeed. His heart didn't seem to be in it at all. He had provided a large tub of fresh flubberworms for the class and told them that to pass the test, their flubberworm had to still be alive at the end of 1 hour. That's fair. As flubberworms flourished best if left to their own devices, it was the easiest exam any of them had ever taken, and also gave Harry, Ron, and Hermione plenty of opportunity to speak to Hagrid. Beaky's getting a bit depressed, Hagrid told them, bending low on the pretense of checking that Harry's flubberworm was still alive. Been cooped up too long. But still, we'll know day after tomorrow, one way or the other. They had potions that afternoon, which was an unqualified disaster. Try as Harry might, he couldn't get his confusing concoction to thicken. And Snape, standing watch with an air of vindictive pleasure, scribbled something that looked suspiciously like a 0 onto his notes before moving away. Then came astronomy at midnight, up on the tallest tower. History of Magic on Wednesday morning, in which Harry scribbled everything Florine Fortescue had ever told him about medieval witch hunts, while wishing he could have had one of Fortescue's Choco Nut Sundays with him in the stifling classroom. Wednesday afternoon meant herbology in the greenhouses under a baking hot sun, then back to the common room once more with sunburnt necks, thinking longingly of this time next day when it would all be over. Their second to last exam on Thursday morning was Defense Against the Dark Arts. Oh, this is awesome. Oh man, this is a way cool exam. Professor Lupin had compiled the most unusual exam any of them had ever taken, a sort of obstacle course outside in the sun, where they had to wade across a deep paddling pool containing a Grindylow, cross a series of potholes full of redcaps, squish their way across a patch of marsh while ignoring misleading directions from a hinky punk, then climb into an old trunk and battle with a new boggart. That is so cool! Excellent, Harry, Lupin muttered as Harry climbed out of the trunk, grinning. Full marks. Flushed with his success, Harry hung around to watch Ron and Hermione. Ron did very well until he reached the hinky punk, which successfully confused him into sinking waist-high into the quagmire. Hermione did everything perfectly until she reached the trunk with the boggart in it. After about a minute inside it, she burst out again, screaming. Hermione, said Lupin, startled, what's the matter? Professor McGonagall, Hermione gasped, pointing into the trunk. She said I'd failed everything. It took a little while to calm Hermione down. When at last she had regained a grip on herself, she, Harry, and Ron went back to the castle. Ron was still slightly inclined to laugh at Hermione's boggart, but an argument was averted by the sight that met them on the top of the steps. Cornelius Fudge, sweating slightly in his pin-striped cloak, was standing there staring out at the grounds. He started at the sight of Harry. Hello there, Harry, he said. Just had an exam, I expect. Nearly finished. Yes, said Harry. Hermione and Ron, not being on speaking terms with the Minister of Magic, hovered awkwardly in the background. Lovely day, said Fudge, casting an eye over the lake. Pity, pity. He sighed deeply and looked down at Harry. I'm here on an unpleasant mission, Harry. The Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures required a witness to the execution of a mad hippogriff. As I needed to visit Hogwarts to check on the black situation, I was asked to step in. Does that mean the appeal's already happened? Ron interrupted, stepping forward. No, it's scheduled for this afternoon, said Fudge, looking curiously at Ron. Then you might not have to witness an execution at all, said Ron stoutly. The hippogriff might get off. Before Fudge could answer, two wizards came through the castle, doors behind him. One was so ancient he appeared to be withering before their very eyes. The other was tall and strapping, with a thin black mustache. Harry gathered that they were representatives of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, because the very old wizard squinted toward Hagrid's cabin and said in a feeble voice, Dear, I'm getting too old for this. 2 o'clock, isn't it, Fudge? The black mushroomed. The black mustached man was fingering something in his belt. Okay. Harry looked and saw that he was running one broad thumb along the blade of a shining axe. Oh, that. Ron opened his mouth to say something, but Hermione nudged him hard in the ribs and jerked her head toward the entrance hall. Why'd you stop me? Said Ron angrily as they entered the great hall for lunch. Did you see them? They've even got the axe ready. This isn't justice. You're exactly right, Ron. You're exactly right. Ron, your dad works for the ministry. You can't go saying things like that to his boss, said Hermione. Why not? He's not going to fire you. But she, too, looked very upset. As long as Hagrid keeps his head this time and argues his case properly, they can't possibly execute Buckbeak. Why doesn't he... Don't they have lawyers? Like, why can't he get someone to represent him in Buckbeak? But Harry could tell Hermione didn't really believe what she was saying. All around them, people were talking excitedly as they ate their lunch, happily anticipating the end of the exams that afternoon. But Harry, Ron, and Hermione, lost in worry about Hagrid and Buckbeak, didn't join in. Harry's and Ron's last exam was divination, Hermione's Muggle studies. They walked up the marble staircase together. Hermione left them on the first floor, and Harry and Ron proceeded all the way up to the 7th, where many of their class were sitting on the spiral staircase to Professor Trelawney's classroom, trying to cram in a bit of last-minute studying. "She's seeing us all separately," Neville informed them as they went to sit down next to him. He had his copy of Unfogging the Future open on his lap, at the pages devoted to crystal gazing. "Have either of you ever seen anything in a crystal ball?" he asked them unhappily. "No," said Ron in an offhand voice. He kept checking his watch. Harry knew that he was counting down the time until Buckbeak's appeal started. "Just start talking about horrible things. She'll believe you. I see..." "I see Harry getting killed. Full marks." The line of people outside the classroom shortened very slowly. As each person climbed back down the silver ladder, the rest of the class hissed, "What did she ask? Was it okay?" But they all refused to say. "She says the crystal balls told her that if I tell you, I'll have a horrible accident," squeaked Neville as he clambered back down the ladder toward Harry and Ron, who had now reached the landing. "That's convenient," snorted Ron. "That's what I was thinking. You know, I'm starting to think Hermione was right about her." He jabbed his thumb toward the trapdoor overhead. "She's a right old fraud." "Well, we're about to see." "Well..." "Yeah," said Harry, looking at his own watch. It was now 2:00. Wish he'd hurry up. Parvati came back down the ladder, glowing with pride. "She says I've got all the makings of a true seer," she informed Harry and Ron. "I saw loads of stuff." "Well, good luck." She hurried off down the spiral staircase toward Lavender. "Ronald Weasley," said the familiar, misty voice from over their heads. Ron grimaced at Harry and climbed the silver ladder out of sight. Harry was now the only person left to be tested. He settled himself on the floor with his back against the wall, listening to a fly buzzing in the sunny window, his mind across the grounds with Hagrid. That's not the only time he's going to listen to a fly buzzing in a sunny window during exams. Isn't it? Doesn't the same thing happen in Goblet of Fire as well? And maybe even Order of the Phoenix? Maybe. Finally, after about 20 minutes, Ron's large feet reappeared on the ladder. "How'd it go?" Harry asked him, standing up. "Rubbish," said Ron. "Couldn't see a thing. So I made some stuff up. Don't think she was convinced, though." "Meet you in the common room," Harry muttered as Professor Trelawney's voice called, "Harry Potter." The tower room was hotter than ever before. The curtains were closed, the fire was alight, and the usual sickly scent made Harry cough as he stumbled through the clutter of chairs and tables to where Professor Trelawney sat, waiting for him before a large crystal ball. "Good day, my dear," she said softly. "If you would kindly gaze into the orb. Take your time now, and tell me what you see within it." Harry bent over the crystal ball and stared as hard as he could, willing it to show him something other than swirling white fog, but nothing happened. "Well," Professor Trelawney prompted delicately, "what do you see?" The heat was overpowering, and his nostrils were stinging with the perfumed smoke wafting from the fire beside him. He thought of what Ron had just said, and decided to pretend. Said Harry. "A dark shape. What does it resemble?" whispered Professor Trelawney. "Think now." Harry cast his mind around, and it landed on Buckbeak. "A hippogriff," he said firmly. "Indeed," whispered Professor Trelawney, scribbling keenly on the parchment perched upon her knees. "My boy, you may well be seeing the outcome of poor Hagrid's trouble with the Ministry of Magic. Look closer. Does the hippogriff appear to have its head?" "Yes," said Harry firmly. "Are you sure?" Professor Trelawney urged him. "Are you quite sure, dear? You don't see it writhing on the ground, perhaps, and a shadowy figure rising, an axe behind it?" "No," said Harry, starting to feel slightly sick. "No blood? No weeping Hagrid?" "No," said Harry again, wanting more than ever to leave the room and the heat. "It looks fine. It's flying away." Interesting how Harry isn't telling the future, and yet that is the future. haven't made a note of it before, so I'm making a note of it now. Professor Trelawney sighed. Oh, well, dear, I think we'll leave it there. A little disappointing, but I'm sure you did your best. Relieved, Harry got up, picked up his bag and turned to go, but then a loud, harsh voice spoke behind him. It will happen tonight. Harry wheeled around. Professor Trelawney had gone rigid in her armchair. Her eyes were unfocused and her mouth sagging. Sorry? Said Harry. But Professor Trelawney didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes started to roll. Harry sat there in a panic. She looked as though she was about to have some sort of seizure. He hesitated, thinking of running to the hospital wing, and then Professor Trelawney spoke again, in the same harsh voice, quite unlike her own. The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers. His servant has been chained these 12 years. Tonight before midnight, the servant will break free and set out to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord will rise again with his servant's aid, greater and more terrible than ever he was. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will set out to rejoin his master. Professor Trelawney's head fell forward onto her chest. She made a grunting sort of noise. Harry sat there, staring at her. Then, quite suddenly, Professor Trelawney's head snapped up again. I'm so sorry, dear boy, she said dreamily. The heat of the day, you know. I drifted off for a moment. I'll say. Harry sat there, staring at her. Is there anything wrong, my dear? You just told me that the Dark Lord's going to rise again. That his servant's going to go back to him. Professor Trelawney looked thoroughly startled. The Dark Lord? He who must not be named? My dear boy, that's hardly something to joke about. Rise again, indeed. But you just said it. You said the Dark Lord. I think you must have dozed off too, dear. She has no idea, said Professor Trelawney. I would certainly not presume to predict anything quite as far-fetched as that. Harry climbed back down the ladder and the spiral staircase, wondering, had he just heard Professor Trelawney make a real prediction? Or had that been her idea of an impressive end to the test? 5 minutes later, he was dashing past the security trolls outside the entrance to Gryffindor Tower, Professor Trelawney's words still resounding in his head. People were striding past him in the opposite direction, laughing and joking, heading for the grounds and a bit of long-awaited freedom. By the time he had reached the portrait hole and entered the common room, it was almost deserted. Over in the corner, however, sat Ron and Hermione. Professor Trelawney, Harry panted. Just hold me. But he stopped abruptly at the sight of their faces. Buckbeak lost, said Ron weakly. Hagrid's just sent this. Hagrid's note was dry this time. No tears had splattered it. Yet his hands seemed to have shaken so much as he wrote that it was hardly legible. Last appeal. Lost appeal. We're going to execute at sunset. Nothing you can do. Don't come down. I don't want you to see it. Hagrid. We've got to go, said Harry at once. He can't just sit there on his own, waiting for the executioner. Sunset, though, said Ron, who was staring out the window in a glazed sort of way. We'd never be allowed. Especially you, Harry. Harry sank his head into his hands, thinking, if I only had the invisibility cloak. Where is it? Said Hermione. Harry told her about leaving it in the passageway under the one-eyed witch. If Snape sees me anywhere near there again, I'm in serious trouble, he finished. That's true, said Hermione, getting to her feet. If he sees you. How do you open the witch's hump again? You tap it and say, Descendium, said Harry. But Hermione didn't wait for the rest of his sentence. She strode across the room, pushed open the fat lady's portrait, and vanished from sight. She hasn't gone to get it, Ron said, staring after her. She had. Hermione returned a quarter of an hour later with the silvery cloak folded carefully under her robes. Hermione, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, said Ron, astounded. First you hit Malfoy, then you walk out on Professor Trelawney. Hermione looked rather flattered. She's cool. She's hip. They went down to dinner with everybody else, but did not return to Gryffindor Tower afterward. Harry had the cloak hidden down in the front of his robes. He had to keep his arms folded to hide the lump. They skulked in an empty chamber off the entrance hall, listening until they were sure it was deserted. They heard a last pair of... Oh, here we go. Are you ready? Pay attention, because we're about to see clues of some time travel. Okay, so... They skulked in an empty chamber off the entrance hall, listening until they were sure it was deserted. They heard a last pair of people hurry across the hall and a door slamming. Guess who that is? That is Harry and Hermione. Hermione poked her head around the door. Okay, she whispered. No one there. Cloak on. Walking very close together so that nobody would see them, they crossed the hall on tiptoe beneath the cloak, then walked down the stone front steps into the grounds. The sun was already sinking behind the forbidden forest, gilding the top branches of the trees. Gilding, huh? Let's see what this word means. I thought it said gliding at first, but then I was like, no, the I and the L are in different positions. Gilding. I just want to make sure I spell it correctly. Where is it? Gilding, there it is. Gilding. Oh, that makes sense. Here, I'll show you. Move this here, take this down. Here. This is gilding. It's stuff you make gold leaf patterns on antique stuff. To cover thinly with gold. That is beautiful. Gilding the top branches of the trees. So imagine it this way. The sun was already sinking behind the forbidden forest, gilding the top branches of the trees. The sun is turning the treetops gold. Isn't that beautiful? I love that. You can see further down here. Cover thinly with gold. There's the... to cover thinly with gold. Beautiful description. They reached Hagrid's cabin and knocked. He was a minute in answering, and when he did, he looked all around for his visitor, pale-faced and trembling. It's us, Harry hissed. We're wearing the invisibility cloak. Look, let us in and we can take it off. You shouldn't have come, Hagrid whispered, but he stood back and they stepped inside. Excuse me. Hagrid shut the door quickly, and Harry pulled off the cloak. Hagrid was not crying, nor did he throw himself upon their necks. He looked like a man who did not know where he was or what to do. This helplessness was worse to watch than tears. Want some tea? He said. His great hands were shaking as he reached for the kettle. Where's Buckbeak, Hagrid? Said Hermione hesitantly. I took him outside, said Hagrid, spilling milk all over the table as he filled up the jug. He's tethered in me pumpkin patch. Thought he ought to see the trees and smell fresh air. Before... Hagrid's hand trembled so violently that the milk jug slipped from his grasp and shattered all over the floor. I'll do it, Hagrid, said Hermione quickly, hurrying over and starting to clean up the mess. There's another one in the cupboard, Hagrid said, sitting down and wiping his forehead on his sleeve. Harry glanced at Ron, who looked back hopelessly. Isn't there anything anyone can do, Hagrid? Harry asked, fiercely, sitting down next to him. Dumbledore, he's tried, said Hagrid. He's got no power to overrule the committee. He told them Buckbeak's all right, but they're scared. You know what Lucius Malfoy's like. Threatened them. It's hard to say it with his accent. I expect. And the executioner McNair, he's an old pal of Malfoy's. But it'll be quick and clean, and I'll be beside him. Hagrid swallowed. His eyes were darting all over the cabin as though looking for some shred of hope or comfort. Dumbledore's gonna come down, Wallet. What happens? Wrote me this morning. Said he wants to be with me. Great man, Dumbledore. he's a good guy. Hermione, who had been rummaging in Hagrid's cupboard for another milk jug, let out a small, quickly stifled sob. She straightened up with the new jug in her hands, fighting back tears. "We'll stay with you too, Hagrid," she began, but Hagrid shook his shaggy head. "You're to go back up to the castle. I told you, I don't want you watching. And you shouldn't be down here anyway. If Fudge and Dumbledore catch you out without permission, Harry, you'll be in big trouble." Hagrid can give them permission. He's a teacher, right? Silent tears were now streaming down Hermione's face, but she hid them from Hagrid, bustling around making tea. Then as she picked up the milk bottle to pour some into the jug, she let out a shriek. "Ron, I don't believe it. It's Scabbers." Ron gaped at her. "What are you talking about?" Hermione carried the milk jug over to the table and turned it upside down. With a frantic squeak and much scrambling to get back inside, Scabbers, the rat, came sliding out onto the table. "Scabbers," said Ron blankly. "Scabbers, what are you doing here?" He grabbed the struggling rat and held him up to the light. Scabbers looked dreadful. He was thinner than ever. Large tufts of hair had fallen out, leaving wide bald patches, and he writhed in Ron's hands as though desperate to free himself. "It's okay, Scabbers," said Ron. "No cats. There's nothing here to hurt you." Hagrid suddenly stood up, his eyes fixed on the window. His normally ruddy face had gone the color of parchment. "They're coming." Harry, Ron, and Hermione whipped around. A group of men was walking down the distant castle steps. In front was Albus Dumbledore, his silver beard gleaming in the dying sun. Next to him trotted Cornelius Fudge. Behind them came the feeble old committee member and the executioner, McNair. "You gotta go," said Hagrid. Every inch of him was trembling. "They mustn't find you here. Go now." Ron stuffed Scabbers into his pocket, and Hermione picked up the cloak. "I'll let you out the back way," said Hagrid. They followed him to the door into his back garden. Harry felt strangely unreal, and even more so when he saw Buckbeak a few yards away, tethered to a tree behind Hagrid's pumpkin patch. Buckbeak seemed to know something was happening. He turned his sharp beak from side to side and pawed the ground nervously. "It's okay, Beaky," said Hagrid softly. "It's okay." He turned to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. "Go on," he said. "Get going." But they didn't move. "Hagrid, we can't. We'll tell them what really happened. They can't kill him." "Go," said Hagrid fiercely. "It's bad enough without your lot in trouble and all." They had no choice. As Hermione threw the cloak over Harry and Ron, they heard voices at the front of the cabin. Hagrid looked at the place where they had just vanished from sight. "Go quick," he said hoarsely. "Don't listen." And he strode back into his cabin as someone knocked at the front door. Slowly, in a kind of horrified trance, Harry, Ron, and Hermione set off silently around Hagrid's house. As they reached the other side, the front door closed with a sharp snap. "Please, let's hurry," Hermione whispered. "I can't stand it. I can't bear it." They started up the sloping lawn toward the castle. The sun was sinking fast now. The sky had turned to a clear purple-tinged gray, but to the west there was a ruby-red glow. Ron stopped dead. "Oh, please, Ron," Hermione began. "It's Scabbers. He won't stay put." Ron was bent over, trying to keep Scabbers in his pocket, but the rat was going berserk, squeaking madly, twisting and flailing, trying to sink his teeth into Ron's hand. "Scabbers, it's me, you idiot! It's Ron!" Ron hissed. They heard a door open behind them, and men's voices. "Oh, Ron, please, let's move. They're going to do it," Hermione breathed. "Okay, Scabbers, stay put." They walked forward. Harry, like Hermione, was trying not to listen to the rumble of voices behind them. Ron stopped again. "I can't hold him. Scabbers, shut up. Everyone will hear us." The rat was squealing wildly, but not loudly enough to cover up the sounds drifting from Hagrid's garden. There was a jumble of indistinct male voices, a silence, and then, without warning, the unmistakable swish and thud of an axe. Hermione swayed on the spot. "They did it," she whispered to Harry. I don't believe it. They did it." And that is the end of chapter 16. I think the movie does that scene better. I really like the time travel stuff with Hermione throwing the spiral shell looking thing and then throwing the rock at Harry's head. I think it's great. I think it demonstrates the concept of time travel really well. And the book doesn't do that. It does it in other ways, but I really like the way the film does it. So next time, we are almost done. How many chapters do we have left? Next time, I will be reading chapter 17, Cat, Rat, and Dog. And then chapter 18, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, which we will learn the truth about everything. How many chapters do we have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, 6 chapters. So, if I read 2 chapters next week, and then 2 chapters the next, so then the chapter after that, we will read the last 2 chapters, and we will be done with Prisoner of Azkaban. And then we can start Goblet of Fire. Very exciting. But that is the end of the stream. Thank you so much for watching. Please continue to chat in the comment section if you would like. I read the comments. And please like the stream as well. It's really helpful. It tells YouTube that you like the stream, and it's more likely to show the stream to other people so I can get more people to watch my streams. And if you're not subscribed, click subscribe. I would love to have you as a member of my channel, and click the bell icon so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. I go live again probably next week, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I'll be playing Halo. And Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be reading more Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and that will be a charity live stream. I'll be sponsoring the Innocence Project. It is a charity that helps get innocent people out of prison, to simplify it. And but as always, my schedule is subject to change. So if you want to know what my streaming schedule is going to be, I post it every week on Twitter. Link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a magical evening. Bye-bye.